Sure, Ginny. Let me quickly get a check with our audience as well. Our two panelists here as well. So Nehal, Srini, Ginny brought about quite a few really good points out there. But one of the most interesting points that he brought about was this trend of AI and analytics moving from the cloud to the edge. Do you see that increasing going forward? Do you think we're going to see a lot more of AI analytics moving to the edge than what we see today?
There could be chances of so it has to be seen whether it will move from cloud to edge because it's a new thing and how it proves within banking, plus the regulations.
The regulations, of course.
Because even moving data to cloud is right now undergoes a lot of regulatory scrutiny. So moving further will be something which has to be seen. But yeah, that's a good thought, interesting thought, and needs to be pursued.
Your 2 cents, Srini?
Yeah, I'm thinking through it, because when I look at it from a healthcare standpoint, a lot of the processing and analytics happens centrally for us, rather than at the edge, because all the data is central. It's in one place. I see maybe an application for it in our patient wearables or on IoT devices and such, where we try to bring care closer to home, right? So instead of the processing and the analytics or the AI engine working in the back end, you could have some of that load being taken at the edge. I used to work in automotive before I moved to healthcare, and there we had quite some amount of discussions and thought around on moving things to the edge. I mean, especially for autonomous cars and such, because latency was a problem. At such time, you would certainly want to do most of your processing and react in a split second when the car is making decisions on whether to turn, stop, move, slow down, accelerate. So there I see a lot of applications for moving to the edge. And from a patient perspective, I am not so sure. I mean, there could be use cases. Today I see most of the AI-based processing happening centrally. But when I look at home care and bringing medical devices to home, there could be a potential for those to work and have these kind of processing and capability at the edge.
Great, absolutely great examples there. And yes, agility is going to be one of the biggest factors that actually determines AI moving to the edge. I'm sure Jeannie would agree to that as well. Now, we are talking about AI models, and we're talking about future-proofing your data strategies. All these are long-term goals, but then to sustain these long-term goals, we need to be able to evaluate how well are we doing with our data management strategies at this point in time. So Nehal, let me start with you. What are some of the key performance indicators on data management that IT leaders must evaluate? What do you do in your organization, and how do you think other IT leaders must go about it?
Okay, in the financial space, to me, so there are multiple key performance indicators, but in the financial space, to me, the topmost would be data freshness, because things are changing so fast. You would know the fintech industry, the spending pattern, government introducing new policies, regulations, interest rates changing, global scenarios, economic conditions. So data needs to keep up with those things. And data freshness will play a key role in terms of crisp decisions, right decisions. So data freshness is the top one. And of course, there are many other KPIs like completeness of the data, whether all the data is there or not. Then data integrity. So if I'm sourcing data from two different places, and similar data, whether that's matching. So that's again somewhat linked to data completeness, because in case it's not matching, then I need to do a continuous reconciliation. So recon plays a key role in financial space. So let's say, for example, you're doing a UPI transaction. So every day we receive a file from NPCI, as well as we receive a file internally, which has to be mapped and reconciled. And in case of disputes and all those things has to be taken care of in a day's time itself. So that's how you see there are not much disputes in UPI transactions. Even if there are, they are resolved within a day's time. Then comes the accuracy of data. So, that also plays a key role, because that's somewhat related to the previous question of poisoning. So if the data is not accurate or has been wrong data has been introduced over there, then that will lead to wrong decisions. So data accuracy is also an important one. Then comes the infra side of it. What is the uptime of my data sources due to the unplanned downtimes, changes which happens on those data sources. So am I able to maintain the uptime as required on a daily basis, on a monthly basis, or on a yearly basis? Then data incidents, if something goes wrong, how quickly am I able to turn them around and bring the data sources up?
Okay.
Because now, as I mentioned last time, also data is a new oil, so it requires continuous supply, and we cannot have incidents leading to long downtimes. And last but not the least, what I can think of is training and awareness of the employees or the users who are accessing that data as well as not accessing as well. So they need to be trained in data governance.
Right, understood. So we heard the story from a banking standpoint. Srini, paint us a picture on what's going on in the healthcare space. What kind of KPIs are you evaluating? Because you told us that at Aster DM you're doing a lot of AI projects, you're doing a lot of analytics. Uh, what tells you that you're heading in the right direction, and what's your advice to other healthcare CIOs and CISOs?
I think a lot of the data KPIs are industry agnostic. So many things that Nihal already mentioned are valid for us in terms of
Healthcare as well, yeah.
consistency, reliability, accuracy, and such. But again, I would add a few more. They're not necessarily from a healthcare standpoint, but for me, availability of data is very important. Nihal spoke about the freshness and and on how new the data is. For us, if you look at healthcare, I value more the history of the patient than the current data when you look at predictions for healthcare conditions, right? So for me, availability of data is an important thing, and that is a KPI that I would want to track. The other two things, from a compliance perspective, are security, privacy, and compliance. So data compliance is an important piece, and that's something I audit, and that is a KPI also to make sure that we are ensuring that the data that we are custodians of our patient data, that we have the right compliance measures in place and the right security and privacy. Retention is another thing that I track. In the healthcare industry, and most healthcare CIOs also would agree with me that data retention is a slightly hazy subject. So in terms of how long do we keep patient data, there are regulations and laws around it. Some of the regulations contradict each other. So many times hospitals end up storing data forever. And which is to some extent the non-compliance, and to some extent a huge cost of storage processing. Database becomes too big, it becomes slow. So applying the retention policies and ensuring that data is minimized is one other thing that I look at from a data standpoint. And finally, it is not really a KPI, but data minimalization is something we are looking at practicing. In the past, we would have collected a lot of personally identifiable information, not personal information, data that is not really necessary from a treatment perspective. And then we carry the obligation of storing and protecting the data. So one of the projects that I'm looking at is to review all of the data that we collect across our different units. And are we collecting more than we need? And how do we process it? How do we keep it? So applying the data minimalization principle and ensuring that it is applied across all of the units is another KPI that I look at.
Got it. And the last point was extremely relevant. Absolutely. You're talking about PII, and of course, we've got huge parameters associated with ensuring PII is secure, especially for data fiduciaries such as yourself after the passing of the DPDP bill. So great points out there. So Jenny, let me come back to you. From our gentlemen here, we've heard availability, accuracy, data retention, some aspects about compliance. Now, you've worked across various industries. You've worked hand in hand with a lot of these CIOs from different verticals. In your opinion, how can these performance indicators be improved through that data modernization initiatives? What are the what are some of the things that our CIOs can do?
Yeah. So first of all, with all due respect, we actually have very good conversation with two of the most regulated industry, all right? And they are most regulated for very, very good reason, to protect our best personal interests, right? In both finance and health. And they are protecting the right reason. And that's why, on the other hand, when they're highly regulated, that means innovation and risk appetite is also a bit lower. Okay. So like, Shanit mentioned that I'm probably not the first one that will jump onto the wagon until it's proven. All right. So when I actually going back to the question you asked, when you're looking at, all of those challenges that, both gentlemen actually mentioned, when you're looking at what we call a modern data platform, those are a standard issue nowadays. As an example, have you ever seen LinkedIn pull up a sign and say, sorry, we have a maintenance window, all right, we are unable to serve XYZ at this time. Now, there are transactions there, right? There are transactions, but at the same time, a distributed database behind the scene powering all that will ensure that if any of the maintenance going on, we can turn off the machine one by one without impacting the overall cluster. If any of those instances that hitting one, machines or a few machine or even entire data center, these services is not interrupted because it's, cross data center replicated. It is because of the fault tolerance that is, running. So the modern distributed data platform today actually solve a lot of those challenges. At the same time, a multi-model access platform will solve a lot of those data sprung problem, where you actually store data and replicate data for many reasons, while you need to update, while you need to delete, right? You need a discovery tool going around to find those data and then delete them one by one, where a multi-access platform will have the data sits in one place and you just have multiple services accessing the same piece of data. So the data management of that will be a lot easier. Okay. So now that doesn't mean that, hey, those guys are not innovating. That's not the case, right? But they are innovating with a lot of legacy, all right? And which is something that they cannot avoid talking about. For example, you still have mainframes, right? You still have a lot of those, legacy system that is hang around and is too hard to change because the people who develop it, right, left 15 years ago, all right? And it was built 20 plus year with all of those knowledge. No one knows, okay? So how do we improve? One of the option is putting the modern technology in front and putting in as a caching, right? But that technology needs to have the caching capability as well as persist, all right? And then start taking over, when you actually get into the operation and when you actually get a lot more comfortable with the operation, then you can start migrating your existing operations into the modern platform one by one, logic by logic. Okay. I think this is one way of looking at that. And the other way of looking at that, Shanit mentioned about keywords around real time, which I believe is really, really true for AI related application. Okay. Now, obviously, from an analytics standpoint, we have two types. One is consumer facing, one is management kind of report. For consumer facing, AI only makes sense when your data is real time, right? You can collect some of the historical data, no problem, trend, but you need to be triggered by the real time event. All right. If the data is not real time, your AI is rubbish. Doesn't matter how good the model is. Okay, so absolutely making sure your modern data platform that can deliver things in real time for you. All right. So in short, if I may conclude, the solution is what we call the modernization journey with the next generation data platform that can help you to solve most of those problems by default because it's a standard issue. In order to get on that journey, use those technology as your caching to start with because it's much easier for you to handle, less risk, right? Then when you're comfortable with it, you coexist for a good period of time. When you're comfortable with it and you start migrating module by module, logic by logic, but you have to pick something that have caching capability, which is super fast and persist. Okay, because if you are not super fast, you won't be able to cache. If you don't persist, you won't be able to migrate. Okay, so those are the key two characteristics will help you to bring, you know, your legacy into the modern platform, and literally by default you solve most of those, you know, challenges because they become a standard issue.